All right, story time. When I was 9 years old, I made a decision that would change my life forever, and I didn't even know it. I was at soccer practice when the coach introduced this little blonde kid that looked like Ricky Schroeder. He had a funny accent. He had moved to Washington from Arkansas. I didn't think much about it. He was a good player. We played and practiced all day. I liked him quite a bit. But after practice, a couple of my friends decided they didn't like him very much. And so they started to pick on him. And he was little. They were big. They tripped him. He was on the ground, and they started to laugh hysterically as they kicked soccer balls at him full force. I was not having that. Something went red inside of me, and I turned around, ran over, and I knocked them down, told them to knock it off. And I turned around, and I helped this boy up and asked him his name. His name was Jason. Dusted Jason off, asked him where he lived. It wasn't very far from where I lived, so we decided to ride home together. Didn't think too much about it. Didn't see him again. And then on Sunday, I was in church. I was in Sunday school. And in walks this same blonde kid, Jason. And they introduced him to the class and got to know him a little bit. Again, didn't think too much about it. Went home, and my mom said she had met a lady and wanted to have him over for dinner. And sure enough, it was Jason and Jason's family. Long story here, but my mom and his mom became very best friends, and our families became very close friends. And Jason became my best friend. We have so many memories together, so many campouts, so many fun things. And over the years, he has become an uncle to my kids. They call him Uncle Jason. And I never realized that as a 9-year-old that I would make a decision that would set a tone and a pattern for the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful that I had examples and leaders that taught me right from wrong, and that I had the courage as a little boy to make a tough decision.
Story time on how/why I slept 3 feet away from my dead neighbor for 6 to 8 weeks during quarantine. Just giving a trigger warning, this story is kind of gross. It was May of 2020 and the pandemic was definitely hitting a peak. Everyone had been at home at this point for the past 2 months, and everyone was kind of going crazy, including myself. I lived alone at the time in a 250 square foot studio apartment that was very small in Los Angeles in the Valley. To give perspective for the rest of the story, my building is kind of like an old motel style, so all of our doors open outside, and the building is a rectangle with my door being the only one on the end of the rectangle and 2 doors on either side of me. It was around the middle of May, and I started to call my mom and tell her that I wasn't really feeling like myself. And what I meant by that was that I was having headaches, I wasn't really sleeping through the night, I was feeling nauseous a lot, and honestly, we all kind of wrote it off as me just feeling a little lonely and going a little crazy during quarantine, just like everyone else was. It was really unlike me to not be able to sleep through the night, so I thought this was really strange, but again, I just kind of wrote it off because I just thought I was really sad and depressed. Throughout the month of May, I noticed that I had an uptick in the amount of bugs in my apartment, which was very unusual because I'm extremely tidy and there's never bugs, but I noticed there was a couple spiders here or there throughout the month, but again, I didn't really think much of it because it was really hot, it was the middle of summer, and sometimes this happens. I started complaining to my manager that I was really sick of the spiders and I needed her to come, but she said she didn't really want to send anyone because it was the pandemic and it wasn't an emergency, and it wasn't like I had a million of them, it was only 2 or 3. Towards the middle of May, I started to complain about a bad smell that I would get whenever there was a heavy breeze, but again, it wasn't anything I could really put my finger on, it was just something that I was smelling occasionally. Truthfully, my best description of this smell was kind of like a dead fish, so I thought that maybe a bird had caught a fish, which in retrospect is the most stupid thing ever because there's no lakes anywhere near me. I started to feel really crazy because, again, I wasn't sleeping, the smell was really starting to bother me, and this was going on for weeks, but my manager was refusing to send anyone out or come out herself because of the pandemic. I started thinking maybe my schizophrenic neighbor who lived to the right of me had his dog had died or something had happened, and I got really worried. But my manager told me she can't just start knocking on neighbors' doors and bothering them, but I had this really bad feeling that something was super wrong and the smell was getting really bad every time it was windy, and I was really, really worried. But remember, it's the middle of the pandemic, and we had been home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so I think I had gotten kind of used to the smell. I called over my boyfriend, he came, and I was super nervous to have him over because of obviously COVID, but he agreed the smell was horrific. He could barely handle it. And then after staying with me for a week, he started to not be able to sleep through the night, he was feeling nauseous and all the same symptoms as me. This is when I started to think something's really wrong. Because my manager said she wouldn't come out, I decided to tell her I was going to call police non-emergency, so they came out and did a wellness check on the neighbor that lived to the right of me who was schizophrenic. Turns out he was perfectly fine and everything was okay. My manager was pretty upset with me because I was disturbing my neighbors, and then they gave me a notice saying that I can't be harassing people in the building. I consulted the police and they told me after 48 hours if my manager didn't convene, then I could call them again. And this is when things got crazy. I felt like I was on a mission because no one was listening to me and my manager was making me out to feel crazy. I'm gonna give another trigger warning for just grossness overall. Okay, so where we left off was the end of May, and this was the peak of the pandemic, as I mentioned, and this was around the time of George Floyd, which, if you know, in Los Angeles was a very crazy time. There was tanks on the street outside my apartment. It was very hectic, and honestly, me complaining about a smell and some spiders was the last of anyone's concerns, especially the police. I had already called the police once, and they had told me that within 48 hours, if nothing had been done or my manager didn't get involved, then I can call them again and they would escalate the situation. But honestly, it was the last of anyone's concerns. So my manager was quite upset with me for harassing my one neighbor, but I had told her she needed to get involved, and honestly, she wasn't really having it. She agreed to send out our maintenance man to meet me at Wednesday around 3 p.m., but of course, Wednesday at 3 p.m. rolled around and my maintenance man was nowhere to be seen. I decided to give it a couple hours, and sure enough, he showed up, and within minutes of showing up to the building, he had walked up the stairs because I was on the second floor, and remember, our building's a rectangle, my unit is at the end, there's 2 doors on either side of me, and stairs that go straight up. He had walked up the stairs, he couldn't even make it up the stairs without starting to vomit. He ripped off his mask, and he said, "I am going to get the master key, someone is dead." I immediately start freaking out because I felt so validated after weeks and weeks of feeling crazy and complaining and no one believing me. My manager stops answering her phone, the maintenance man literally disappears and never comes back, so I decide I'm calling the police. Things went from 0 to 100 really fast, and honestly I was like the prime suspect in all of this because I'd been the only one who was complaining the entire time about this situation. I shouldn't say I was a suspect, I was mostly just the main point of contact for this situation. Within a few minutes, there was 8 cops that were all inside my apartment gathering information, and they said they were just going to start busting down doors. The logical answer was to start with my neighbor who lived to the left of me because we already talked to the neighbor who lived on the right of me. And this is when the most disgusting, craziest thing happened. So the cops gather the information they need from me and they decide to start with logically the neighbor on the left since they already talked to the neighbor on the right. And they say there's 6 cops, they all have their guns drawn, and they say, okay, LAPD, exit with your hands raised in the air. You've got 30 seconds. We're going to start counting down. Right before the end of the 30 seconds, one of the cops says, hey, let's draw down our guns. Did anybody just try to open the door and see if it's unlocked? And I was like, why would it be unlocked? Brace yourself. So the cop twists the doorknob and he opens it maybe an inch. The amount of bugs that came out of this unit, it looked like 1,000 bugs, thousands of them, flying out of the unit. They immediately slammed the door and the cops called for a ton of backup. The cops started ripping off their masks and multiple of them were throwing up over the side of the railing. I slammed my door and they told me to stay inside and don't come out. Long story short, they said this was the worst decomposed body they had ever come across, and they see a lot of decomposed bodies. Not going to go too into the specifics of it, especially for the privacy of the person, but let's just say they were liquefied and they were basically a skeleton at this point. All the symptoms my boyfriend and I were experiencing were simply because of the fumes and toxins that were releasing from the body and natural gases that were making me extremely sick during pretty much all of quarantine. And that is the story of how I slept 3 feet away from my dead neighbor. Let me know what questions you have in the comments.
What's the worst thing you've seen on someone's phone or laptop by accident? Because basically, I was the computer, nerd in my neighborhood. So one time my neighbor, his laptop wasn't working. So he's like, hey, can you fix something? And it was the worst thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Basically, I went over, mind you, I'm friends with his kids, right? One of them's a year older than me, one of them is younger than me. So I was friends with both of them. I come over, we're sitting at the dining table. It's him and the entire family, mom, dad, 2 boys, whatever. We're all sitting at the dining table. I'm going in, do a simple virus scan, whatever. Tells me something's up with the downloads. I go to the downloads folder. I'm going through it. One thing sticks out. A Kim Possible folder. Mind you, at the time, I used to watch Kim Possible. I liked Kim Possible. I wasn't traumatized by fucking Kim Possible. So I click on this folder, I open it. First, it's all pictures. And I was like, oh, okay. Maybe, there's a file that wasn't, supposed to be there that's there. Whatever. Click on the first picture. It's a squad picture. Classic. Just, the cast. Whatever. The dude that's in the locker, Ron, the little rat, whatever. Next picture is Kim absolutely getting railed. Why? Why? And I freaked out, so I started clicking next really fast, and it got worse and worse and worse. It was Kim, and then Ron, and it was the rat, and then it was the dude in the locker. I didn't even know he had a second half. I thought it was just here and up. I just thought it was here and up. I was so confused. And then the guy that's a year older than me, he freaks out. He finally registers what's going on. He shuts the laptop real quick, and then the parents kick me out, and the little brother. By the time that we stepped foot outside of that house, the little brother told the entire neighborhood. Everyone called him I will not say the nickname, but I'm so fucking traumatized. I love Kim Possible, not anymore. Can't do it.
Why you should be really careful how you treat people, and also why you should stick up for people. When I was in 8th grade, I was really good friends with this kid named Damon. Me, him, and this other friend of mine, we were all at the same table. In English class, we would joke around, talk about the same TV shows and movies. We were the loudest group by far. But near the end of the school year, Damon ended up moving. And it really sucked, but we said goodbye to Damon, who I should tell you was this small, short, funny, wisecracking kid. Didn't matter what you threw at him, he was super witty. So we said goodbye to him, we all went to 9th grade. It was either the end of 9th grade or the middle of sophomore year that I saw Damon again. He had transferred back to our school, saw him at a pep rally, and I was sitting by myself because I despised pep rally. He was like, Josadak, do you remember me? I was like, oh my gosh, David? He was so much taller, face looked different, his voice was deeper. This was obviously a different kid, but really happy to see me. So we started talking, catching up. Then I started noticing that he was getting hit in the back of the head with tiny paper balls. He wasn't even flinching. I looked behind me to see 3 boys throwing paper balls at him. What? Dude, do you see what they're doing? Yeah, I'm used to it. What? This was not the same witty boy that I knew. Oh god, I'm running out of time. Watch part 2 to see my part 2 of the kids throwing paper balls at my friend's story. So when I told Damon this was happening and he didn't seem to notice, I was very confused. The kid that I used to know would not let this fly. He instead kept his head down, insisted that it was okay, and said that he was used to it. Whatever happened between 8th grade and now completely changed the way that he viewed this behavior. I saw it as unacceptable. He thought it was okay. So instead of accepting that, I turned around and said, hey, what are we in 5th grade? The 3 boys looked at me from the top of the bleachers and said, whatever. That's what high schoolers who act like 5th graders say. And then I said, stop it, it's not funny. They didn't stop. They laughed. But Damon thanked me. I didn't know who this kid was anymore. I can only assume that this type of stuff was happening to him often. That kids at his new school were treating him poorly. And because of that, he thought he was less than. I literally never saw Damon again after that day, but I hope that he knows that he can stand up for himself and that that behavior is not okay. Be careful how you treat people, it stays with them. And it can fundamentally change them. Get them, bye.
Oh, I lived next to a cult growing up and I completely forgot about it, but my mom reminded me about it today. Basically, when I lived in Egypt, I lived in an apartment building and I lived on the 4th floor, and right next to us, there was this big ass mansion. It was huge. I would always see it, not a single adult. Everyone that lives there was like 18 to 21. It was so weird, like college people, right? One of which was my fucking babysitter, and she was the best babysitter I've ever had. She literally got me like fucking PS2 games all the time, right? Basically, downstairs is a playground, and I would always like play basketball, and I would throw it on their side. They would always give it back, never a problem, right? One time I throw it on the street, and I go outside to get it. There's a line of cops right outside their mansion, and one of them grabs me, puts them behind me, and they're just like, and they're like, be careful, like, they're so dangerous. It's a cult. They've been living there illegally for the past year, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what the fuck? They start arresting them, whatever, and they have like weird necklaces. My mom comes downstairs, she's nosy, she asks like, what the fuck is the cult about? Turns out they worship Russian dolls, like, you know, the ones that have multiple baby ones inside. They worship the baby. Have you guys like lied to your friends and forgot to like come clean at some point? Because I lied 3 years ago, and this is me coming clean. Because basically, I had a pet bunny, right? His name is Leo, so cute. He's like this little orange brown thing, and it's so cute. I love him, right? But I got allergic, so I had to give him away. Found a farm, so cute, literally like with a family. It's so cute. Anyways, my friends came over for dinner once, and I lied to them and told them that I cooked it, Leo, and that they were eating Leo, but I didn't tell them till like they were like halfway through their meal. But they were all white, and they all got so like scared of being accidentally racist because I said it was cultural. So they all just kept eating it like my pet. They were eating my pet, not saying anything. They're just like, Weeks and months later, they're just like, yeah, like that was really awkward. Like, please don't do that again. And I was like, no, like I literally won't. Don't worry. Like, no more pets for me, you know? It's literally doing fine. I'm so sorry for lying to you 3 years ago and still mentioning it every once in a while. It's not true. Don't worry. You never ate raw.